Good afternoon. This will be, sadly, a very brief press conference because of logistics and other events happening later on today. But today, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern is in Paris for talks with country leaders and tech companies on the Christchurch call. They plan to help end terrorist and extreme content being posted and shared on social media. Tonight, I'm hosting UN Secretary General Guterres in Auckland and will be leaving shortly after the post-cabinet press conference, as I said. Tomorrow we head to Fiji with the UN Secretary General to attend the Pacific Leaders meeting in Suva, 14 and 16 May, on behalf of the Prime Minister. So, during this time, Kelvin Davis will be acting Prime Minister. Upon my return on Thursday, I will resume acting Prime Minister duties until Prime Minister Ardern arrives back in New Zealand on Saturday morning. But just say I'd like to take this chance to acknowledge the passing of Ta Hekenukumai Busby, who died at the weekend. He was an esteemed kaumata of Tai Tokerau, a master carver and waka builder, a navigator with a curious mind, a story for every occasion, and now a legacy that will not be forgotten. Our thoughts are with Sir Ex Whānau at this time. And this morning I had the pleasure to see, alongside the Minister of Defence, the arrival of our new state-of-the-art dive and hydrographic vessel due to be formally launched on the 7th of June. It's an important vessel purchased by this government that gives substance to our Pacific reset. The new ship will vastly improve our ability to assist both ourselves and our Pacific neighbours in times of need and boost New Zealand's maritime presence in the southwest Pacific. I do encourage you all to go down to Wellington's Queen's Wharf and see what a project delivered on time, on budget, looks like. Now I'd also like to take this opportunity to congratulate Mike Williams and the Howard League on their results in the first 8 months of their Driving Offenders program. This is a program funded by the Provincial Growth Fund aimed at young people on probation for driving offences. And you recall, in the Maori world, when it comes to offences, more than 1 out of 2 starts their first offence with a driving offence, namely not having a licence. 8 months in, they have helped 1,111 offenders pass their driving licence tests, 68.86% of which are Maori. The flow-on effects of a program like this are huge. For ex-offenders seeking entry-level jobs, a driver's licence is not just a requirement, it's an essential visa to gaining employment. With programs like this, regions will have safer roads with fewer unlicensed drivers, a supply of work-ready people, and higher levels of employment. Programs like this leave and have the potential to create real social and economic benefits in the local community. Now, in a speech just 80 months ago, it was outlined from here the reasons why this coalition government was being formed. Announcements like the one made yesterday are a firm reminder of the fundamental direction of this government: to turn the tide of irresponsible capitalism and manage the economy in a way that benefits all New Zealanders. And yesterday, the Prime Minister and Housing Minister unveiled measures that will help the largest number of chronic homeless people ever. These measures will, in the immediate term, turn around the lives of more than 1,000 long-term homeless people by not only helping them into homes, but also connecting them with health and social services that can tackle the prevalent and complex problems many long-term homeless have. And today, Cabinet signed off on the residential tenancies healthy home standards that will lift the living conditions of over 600,000 New Zealanders, or New Zealand families who live in rented homes. This is a further delivery on our priority towards New Zealanders having a warm and dry home to improve the well-being of our citizens and their families. The Healthy Homes Guarantees Act passed in December means standards approved by Cabinet today for heating, insulation, ventilation, moisture and drainage and draft stopping will be set to make rental homes warmer, and drier. In setting these standards, we took into consideration almost 800 submissions reflecting the views of landlords and of tenants. Our job was to find the balance between people having warm, dry homes whilst not imposing unrealistic expectations and costs on landlords. We also considered the rights of tenants to enjoy the benefits of these changes as soon as possible, and the reality for landlords to have the time and the resources needed to comply. These measures are aimed at tackling the long-term challenges in New Zealand's housing market. They are a considered response to a desperate need and will require multiple parties to play their part. Any questions?
Mr. Peters, what's your concern with TikTok being sold? Why are you concerned that it's a European company?
Well, it was offshore owned. It was bought back by Fonterra in 2001. And you may well say that the circumstances of Fonterra's management, under which some people got paid multi-million dollars in salaries, has led to now an added value company, an operation like that, going now onto offshore ownership. How are we ever going to make it if, unlike other countries that see the need to take their primary based products into serious added value for their own country's wealth and employment, how are we going to make it if we don't understand that message?
Is it the view of the entire government or just New Zealand First?
It's the view of every rational, sane person who looks at the kind of economy we are. And all over the world I see what economies do. Even economies without resources, acquire-based resources, determined to added value. So it's a sad day brought about by circumstances which may not be in the total control of Fonterra's current management, but there had to be surely some reflection when you see that event happening alongside Westland.
Will this change your view on whether the Dairy Industry Restructuring Act will agree to Fonterra's requests to say not have to take all milk or not have to supply its competitors?
My view or the government's view?
Your view.
Well, I can speak on behalf of myself. And I have long campaigned for, as you well know, decades, and trying to get some sound nationalistic understanding of how we might progress. And will it have a bearing on our view? Yes, it will.
Mr. Peters, can I ask?
But that's just, you asked me for my personal view.
How concerning is it that 70% of crime went unreported last year?
Well, if it went unreported, how can you exactly, with accuracy, know it was 70%?
Did you report out today?
Now, I'm asking you a very, very significant question. I know what the media wrote, but if it's unreported, how do you know that 70% is the fact?
Do you have a
I'm still waiting for an
different
answer,
fact?
but maybe somebody else has got one.
Sorry, Mr. Peters, it's the new crime and victim survey put out by the Ministry of Justice using new statistics, New Zealand methodology, where they code and find out whether they believe a crime has been committed based on what people say in face-to-face surveys.
Well, yes, but I did read it, and I saw it as a category for people that hadn't reported a crime because they didn't know a crime had happened. Now, round about then, you're getting a bit academic, very bureaucratic, and maybe not suburb and village-based in terms of what you're reporting. Now, I'm not challenging whether that's remotely accurate or otherwise. I just want to know whether you think it's accurate as reporters.
Can we ask whether you think it's accurate as acting Prime Minister?
Well, I'd like to have much more substance behind that sort of research than what I'm reading. In the same way as I pick up the New Zealand Herald in the last few days and I'm seeing all sorts of figures on immigration without any exactitude as to what it all means. And I kind of think, here we are in May 2019, where we need far better research than that.
So you're questioning those figures, you're
Pardon?
questioning that figure, you're questioning that report, that
Which report?
the report that we're talking about, the 70%.
No, I'm just asking you, journalists, clever as you are, a simple question as to whether you believe it or not.
But you didn't question that report, so you're
You
questioning
do.
that number.
It's from the Ministry of Justice. It's not up to us to establish the veracity of the research.
Oh, well, I've been reading figures from the Ministry of Immigration for years too, and I know they're not accurate.
Do you think if 77% of crime went unreported last year, it's a poor reflection on police and public don't have
Well,
space.
say
It's
it
something
was
to be done if they
40%,
do.
say it was 30% or 40%, it's still massively unsatisfactory. And it does impute the conclusion that maybe they thought it was a waste of time reporting. So that's why we need 1,800 more frontline policemen and women, which we're bringing you as fast as we possibly can, with 445 backup staff.
Will the government consider urgently introducing roadside drug testing?
The government is seriously considering that now. We always have. If you're going to have drunken driving testing, you should have drug-effective testing for drivers as well. But what we've got to make sure we've got first is the scientific utilities all over the country to ensure that when we go for the test, it is scientifically accurate. And we haven't, I have to tell you, got those utilities now. And before some in the opposition start making a fool of themselves, they did last week, perhaps they could explain to us how over 9 years part of that, they put no money into that at all and underscored their neglect by having insufficient frontline policemen and women out on the roads.
When's
Do
your
you think we
discussion
need
document
random,
coming out,
roadside-
Peter? When's your discussion document coming out? On the cabinet approved discussion document that will go out for public consultation on the issue of roadside saliva testing for drugs?
Very, very soon.
When you say very, very soon, what does that mean?
Soon.
In a day, in a week?
No, not in a day and a week, because it requires one or two other requirements, including us being able to foresee the capacity of having the scientific utilities that are critical for us to make a judgment, which are far more complex than just alcoholic drunken driving.
What do you
Do
say
you
to
think-
families of the crash victims at Waverley where 7 people died because the couple got behind the wheel and they had been smoking synthetics? Like, how long should they wait?
Well, look, that is just a disastrous circumstance, and it was tragic in its reporting, and the reaction of the surviving partner as well. We're not going to make politics out of that. We're going to do our utmost to try and eradicate the future potential of that happening over and over again by getting the men and women out there to do the job, and by getting the scientific utilities we need to do the job. And when we do that, which is a matter of enormous priority for us, we'll announce it, and it'll be soon.
Do you think that random roadside drug testing regime needs to be in place before we go to a referendum on legalising cannabis?
Well, what's the connection?
Clearly, if you're going to legalise cannabis, you're going to need some kind of regime in place where you can test for that, whether drivers are impaired.
You mean if there is the potential for there to be a yes vote, it heightens the need for both the law, the men and women, and the scientific equipment to do the job? The answer is profoundly yes.
You would like to see random roadside drug testing in place before we go to a referendum?
No, excuse me. Please don't try and put words in my mouth. I'm disagreeing with you. That wasn't likely to happen. Then getting what we're going to do now in the field is critically important. But there may be a further reason yet to be decided in a referendum why it become even more important.
Do you think that
What
we
is your main focus at this meeting in Suva this week?
My main focus is to represent the Prime Minister, number one, to ensure that some of the issues about which we speak, which will be on matters like climate change and other issues like that, have a clear message from the New Zealand government. But the part of our December or late 2017 announcement on the Pacific Reset mentioned in particular climate change, to which we've increased the budget by 100 million currently with respect to that issue. And so it's to back up the government's stance, the stance the Prime Minister would have made, and to have bilaterals with other leaders over there, but that's yet to be determined.
As Foreign Minister, what's your view on America's decision on Friday to almost double tariffs on Chinese imports? It seems to be an escalation of the trade war. How do you think it might affect New Zealand, and how should we prepare for it or react to it?
First of all, that is a matter for the domestic market of the United States to decide upon, and I can't comment in that respect. But on the larger picture, it just makes, for those who believe in multilateralism and free trade, it makes our life more difficult.
You mentioned the cowardly driving driver licensing regime before, funded through the PGF, and how successful it's been. Do you have any other examples of projects that have been funded through the PGF that have been successful yet?
I've got scores of projects that have been successful yet, and it little behoves you to have that cynicism from an urban background, whilst out in the countryside in Provincial New Zealand, there are seriously exciting programs starting. I'll give you one. It's a mussel farm in Fonterra, neglected and forgotten all these years, but which is on its way now. There's probably 125% into the project, but it'll be the biggest mussel farm in the world. That'll be hundreds of jobs and a significant driver for the economy in Fonterra, but we'll add to that other added value projects as well. So this idea that somehow all the jobs appear on day one when you make the investment demonstrates, not in your case of course, but how many parliamentarians have had no business background whatsoever. And we do not intend to put up with that sort of cynicism and urban grind against the export wealth creating people of this country any longer.
Mr. Peters, do you believe in or do you support, a gun register?
I know that that is a matter that will be seriously considered by Cabinet. We have to wait and see what its full ramifications are.
Minister Nash told Stuff that he will be taking that to Cabinet and pushing for it with his colleagues. Is that something you personally think would be helpful?
Well, taking to Cabinet is always helpful. I don't want to presage what Cabinet might think.
Shane Jones this morning said he's partaken in unnecessarily loud advocacy for the Provincial Growth Fund at times. Would you tend to agree with that?
He had what?
He had partaken in unnecessarily loud advocacy for the fund at times.
No, I wouldn't agree with that.
He hasn't been given a dressing down, told to keep down the rhetoric.
Excuse me. If you know what the grind is out in the provinces of this country, in the places like Hokianga and Kawerau, Murupara and all over New Zealand, if you saw all the dilapidated villages and towns and hamlets that used to be part of our wealthy past, then you'd be rather loud about it, and I hope he keeps on being loud about it. And just because he's got rather better understanding of the English language than some of you, there's no reason why he should be criticised. One more question, because I've got to get going.
On overseas investment, you've given us your personal view of TikTok. Do you have a personal view on the Eugenie Sage blocking the Oceana sale in Waihee Mine that David Clark is supporting?
That matter's sub judice. I can't answer.
There hasn't been an appeal yet?
To the best of my knowledge, I do believe there is an appeal underway, and I should not contaminate that appeal by giving even the standing for the Prime Minister my view.
It's a civil case.
Doesn't make any difference.
Can I just ask
Should you know that? Yes.
Can I just ask about the Healthy Homes announcement that you made? Did Cabinet sign off all of the draft proposals? How does that enough?
The standards?
Yeah.
Yes, I did. Sorry, but I've got to get going. Thank you very much.